to the first in a literary
series that we are hosting with our friends at the KMU Library. We are extremely happy to have Chitra Viraraghavan with us.
Thank you.
And yeah, welcome. Before I introduce you, yes, thank you. And before we start, I'd like to say that it's wonderful to see so many members of the Coady community here joining us at school. So a warm welcome to all of you. Before we start, before I even introduce you, we had a bit of a conversation yesterday, and we had a poster advertising that you were coming and celebrating that, and we had posted it all over. And you had come, and your first comment was, "It looks like a bit of a wanted poster."
Yes, in 3 states.
And so we made a wanted sign. But I want you to realize it's because you're wanted.
Thank you very much, Corey.
Truly and warmly.
Thank you very much.
So that's for you.
Thank you very much.
Chitra Viraraghavan studied at KIS between the years 1980 and 1983. She received the Journalism and Social Sciences Award in her graduating year and was inducted into the National Honor Society. She went on to do her bachelor's and master's degrees in English literature at Stella Maris College in Madras. Between 1988 and 1993, she worked as an editor with Oxford University Press, India, based in Madras. And in 1993, she went to Tufts University in Massachusetts to do a PhD, also in English.
Yes.
And as a doctoral candidate, she taught freshman English and ESL to first-year university students, including a number of international students. She received her PhD in 2000 for her dissertation entitled Capital Adventures, Gender, Economics, and Englishness in Victorian Fiction. Since her return to Chennai, she has been a textbook writer as well as a freelance book editor. Her first novel, The Americans, was published in April 2014 by Fourth Estate, which is the literary imprint of HarperCollins India. HarperCollins USA has acquired the US rights of her novel, and The Americans will be released in the US in the summer of 2015. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I will read a short book synopsis as well. Tara, you pronounce your character Tara or Tara? Tara. Single, Indian, mid-30s, traveling from Madras, Chennai, to the US at her sister's behest, is the linking character in a novel with 10 others, each telling their own story. Set in different American cities in 2005. Based mostly in the Indian American community, the stories explore what it means to be in America, what it means to be American, with the novel's title referring to the sometimes ironic distance between perception and reality. So first of all, just something about the book that I noticed. I mean, it's a series of character-driven narratives, and as it says in the introduction, there's 11 different characters. Right? And they're certainly, the chapters are certainly connected thematically. And otherwise, in other ways they're connected too. And it is, but they could also stand apart to some extent.
Yes, I guess there is the one linking character, which is Tara, and she's the one who kind of ties all the others together. But each of them has their own independent story, and not all are necessarily linked. They don't even meet. And some characters come into the book halfway through the book as well. So it's almost like a play in a sense, where there are people coming in and going out. And yes, and all independent stories in a way.
Okay. And I found it to be, and the people that I've talked with here, and many people have read it, by the way, but it was extremely a fascinating and powerful structure.
Thank you.
And so, when did this book start in your mind? When did it germinate?
I and Tara have certain common factors. It's certainly not an autobiographical novel in the way first novels tend to be. But I did study at Tufts in the mid-90s, and then I went back to the US in 2005.
Okay.
And so I had somewhat of a perspective on my own experience there and other people. And the way life unfolds. So what was your question again?
Well, so where did it start?
Yeah, where did it start? I had a bunch of ideas, really, and then I had to create characters that would animate those ideas. And then there was one character that I got rid of. And then I found, to my horror, that I had 11 characters, which basically meant I had 11 different plot lines to control. And I ended up having to think each idea out to its most dramatic conclusion and then write each story out separately. Okay. And then write the linking story last, because that had to be the most powerful and sort of carry the narrative momentum of the book. So there were characters I got rid of because they weren't working hard enough for me. And yes, 11 different stories. It was something to pull off. I had to kind of teach myself how to write this novel, because this is not what someone does. I mean, anyone who's planning to write a novel, don't write a novel with multiple characters. Stick to one. Make it an iBook. Much easier.
I have a follow-up question to that, but on the first question, when you're talking about were you a writer growing up? Did you write? Did you journal? Did you write when you were a student here?
I've written poetry and I've written short stories. My very first story was written here in Cody School, and there's a germ of it in the book because I decided I should pay tribute. In between, I've done different types of writing, but not necessarily, fiction or creative writing. I've been a textbook writer. I've done academic writing. I guess, started doing this type of writing somewhere in the mid-2000s.
Okay. So how long did it take to write this book?
I started the original part, the earliest section is probably from 2008, but I really couldn't get to it till about 2010 because of work pressure and so on. Okay. So about 3 years, if I actually,
Okay. Not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad. I am jumping ahead to a question based on what you said, so remind me to jump back when I get there. Okay. Joseph Conrad, the novelist, and I'm paraphrasing wildly here, said something that if you really knew what went into writing a novel, you wouldn't start. You wouldn't do it. Before you respond. But yesterday you said something, we had a conversation, and you said something like, I was talking about, it must take an incredible amount of discipline to sit down and write. And you said, not really. For me, it was natural and it kind of poured out of me a little bit. Not that it was easy, but that it poured out of you. And that it kind of, you felt it and it was not unenjoyable to write.
It was very enjoyable to write.
Yeah.
But I wasn't writing every single day for those 3 years by any means, because there was a lot of research that had to go into the book. And I think I spent a lot of time actually doing the research. And the actual writing, that's really what I meant. It didn't take me that long once things had gelled in my head. So I'm not the kind of writer who, is very disciplined in that sense and sits down at her desk every day and does it. I wish I was, but I'm not. It takes me a while to get my thoughts together, and then it takes me not that long to put it down on paper.
It makes me think, though, that you wrote it for yourself, or out of a sense of, you were, as a writer, you were pleasing yourself.
In a sense, I think most writers are, or ought to be, because that's the way you get the most authentic stuff out of yourself, and you also discover what you think in the process of writing, and which is also fun, and it's very solipsistic, but it's still fun, right? Yeah. To figure out what you're thinking about something.
All right, that's wonderful. And it's also so cool talking about the KIS connection in your acknowledgments. It's wonderfully affirming as a school to see some of our former teachers there.
Yes. Mr. Satyaraj, Vijendran Satyaraj.
Right.
In a sense, this book is dedicated to him.
Wow.
Yes, except that I'm not someone who really believes in formal dedications. He is there in the back, and I call him Dr. Mirabilis, which he definitely was. And Dr. Mirabilis means wonderful teacher. And I think most English teachers, at least this is what I was trying to convince some people yesterday, that the English teacher is the one person you're going to remember your whole life, because they're almost like your analysts. They're trying to make you read really difficult things and trying to get you to develop your sense of the world and so on. He was that person for me. And not just for me, he was that person for my entire class. And he continues to be that person because I've met his present students. And he was a great inspiration. And I went into publishing also because it was his idea.
Okay.
That's
wonderful. And, incidentally, I met him 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and he'd be most
in
embarrassed
Portland.
by this exchange.
Which is,
being most self-effacing by nature.
Sure, the minute he reads your novel, he wouldn't be embarrassed, he would be honored.
He's read it. I sent him a copy. He was the first person I sent a copy to.
That's wonderful. Yes. And that's wonderful. And my follow-up is, and in addition to,
yes, there are my classmates also from the class of 83. Sunil Desai, who helped me with some of my research, and Chitra now his wife. And they hosted me, yes. They hosted me in California, and it was wonderful. They've been friends all these years.
So in addition to those personal connections with people, with staff, with teachers, and with classmates, could you identify other ways in which KIS academically or holistically, affected you or formed you, perhaps, as a writer?
Certainly. I think it was, my father was in the Indian Administrative Service, and he took voluntary retirement and came here to follow his passion, which is plants and other related things. And so it was just my luck, I guess, to land up in Cody School, and it was a very different experience from what I'd had previously. And it was quite an experience in which my teachers actually backed me up on many things, and I had a wonderful time in the school, and I think it definitely helped me become a writer, although it's taken me 31 years. I think it should take anybody who's a writer much less time, which is what I was encouraging the English students to do. I think just the multicultural experience, which is quite a powerful one, and I think it's becoming more and more powerful now, just because the world is so torn apart by all sorts of cultural dislocations and so on. So I think, yes, Cody School was very important in many ways.
So
very formative.
I have a very personal, informal follow-up on that question.
Mm-hmm.
You have an extremely minor character in your book.
Called
named Corey.
But not Corey Stitch.
And it doesn't say Corey Stitch. And the character...
and he's the coolest dancer.
And thank you. And the character, Corey, happens to be an extremely good dancer. Was this a memory? Is this biographical from a memory from Canteen, which we used to have right here in the CAMU?
I'm going to say yes.
Wow. Thank you. It's okay to not tell the truth. So
Yes.
Thank you very much. We do want you to read, some passages from your book, and we also want some questions from our audience, and I know that people have them. But just a couple more things, and again, back to the narrative question. You know what a method actor is, or a character actor who gets into the role. You had 11 different characters. Are you a method writer? Did you have to get into the head of each character as you wrote it?
You certainly do. Otherwise, you'll never achieve any authenticity with regard to the voices. And it's for readers to really tell me whether I've managed to pull it off or not. But there were 11 different voices. And one device I used to just make it easier for myself was to try and write different types of genre writing. So there's the teenager is written in the style of a young adult, a novel, and there's a woman who's very interested in romance novels, and that bit is written sort of ironically from her point of view, a bit of a fantasy, a romantic fantasy. There's action adventure, there's magic realism, and there are different styles, and I was just having fun with it. And also trying to make each voice as distinct as possible, because 11 different voices.
There's an
men and
autistic
women.
boy.
There's an autistic boy.
Which you handle very well.
Thank you very much.
Fascinating voice.
Thank you. There's men and women, there are young people and old people. So it was a fair challenge. But
Right.
I don't know. It's up to readers to tell me.
I think you succeeded.
Thank you.
And I would just add, just off the top of my head, that it seems like you just said, write when you're, start writing when you're earlier. But I think this novel shows that it's okay to start when you're later too, because the result is pretty sophisticated.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
I don't think that's an accident.
I was just thinking the other day that maybe I wrote these different voices because I was trying to write 11 different novels, and I'm trying to pull it all off in one.
And I think you do. And the other interesting thing is the title, The Americans, and which is a great title, by the way. And it took me a while to identify what you meant by the Americans. I mean, it didn't take me that long, but it took me a while. And I was wondering, at first I was wondering if this was a piece of kind of cultural criticism of Americans and that connection with that.
Someone actually asked me if this was a sociological piece, which is why I said, The Americans, a novel. Nobody can sue me.
But what you mean by the Americans kind of comes into focus as the novel comes along.
Yes.
And the epigraph is a Thoreau quote which says, "The American has dwindled into an odd fellow." Would you like to, in a very general sense, comment on your view of the Indian experience in America?
Yes.
Which is the subject of your book.
Which is the subject of my book, but it also does have people who are non-Indian. But yes, that is the subject of my book. It was meant to be ironic in the sense that we think of the Indians in America as Americans, and maybe they consider themselves American, but I don't really know whether that is how they are viewed in what is now their own country. Most often they are marginalized, even if they are solid middle class types. And there are some people who are out of the mainstream totally. For instance, they're illegal aliens. There are all sorts of people there. And we assume that the successful software type is the Indian American there, and it's not necessarily the case. And the other thing I was trying to do is, this was meant to be a counterblast to the Indian Americans writing in America. Because they write about India very freely and quite critically, or they exoticize India. And I was thinking it was about time that somebody reversed the gaze and said, okay, let's take a look at these guys and let's see what they're up to. And and so that was the genesis of the title and the book as well.
That's extremely interesting and wonderful. And on that note, do you have, I guess, what writers influence you or do you look up to? Are they predominantly Indian writers? Are they Indian American writers? Can you categorize it that way? Who do you take your cue from?
All sorts of writers. I think, for instance, there is a whole character who only appears in the journal entries, which is my little tribute to American literature. And of course, the quote from Thoreau also. There are lots of references to American lit throughout the book. I guess in terms of writing, there have been so many people over the years, but I like writing that is fair and simple and austere and precise. And the people that I've tried to model my writing on would be people like that, whether it's Tim Winton, who is this Australian writer. There's Ashoka Mitran, who is a Tamil writer who I can only read in translation. I don't read Tamil. Catherine Mansfield, people from all over the world.
All right. Well, it's been wonderful to talk to you, and we'd love to hear you read a piece. And it may be good to tell the audience the character.
Yep.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll read from the Autistic Boys piece to begin with, just because I'm comfortable with that piece.
The page number?
Yes, sure. Okay. Yeah, it's 242. This story is from the section about a boy called Rahul. He's 9 years old and he's autistic. And his sister is called Lavi. She has her own story. But there will be references to Lavi, so I just want you to know that. And his language I've tried, I don't know how well I've succeeded, but I've tried to mimic how an autistic person might write or think. And so I think you might find that in the language. I'm hoping you will. The boy in the drawing had a square, pale brown face and eyes like long, narrow boxes with circles in them. The circles were colored dark brown. He had black hair that was like a fat upside-down U on top of his head. His shirt was a brilliant red, blue, and green. Excuse me. It was like the shirt Mom's sister had given him, wrapped in plastic. Lavi had taken off the plastic and hung up the shirt in his closet. The boy had skates on. The boy was flying and his shirt stretched out behind him like wings. Rahul sat on the floor of his bedroom and looked at the drawing. He colored the sky with a pale blue crayon, dividing it up into squares and then going evenly from left to right, till they were all done. He had left white spaces for the 8 clouds. They were all the same shape, like flowers with 6 perfectly symmetrical petals. There were 2 clouds in front of the boy, 2 behind him, and 4 on top. Rahul lay down on his back on the floor and stared at the ceiling. He could see the stars that Mom had pasted on the ceiling, but only just. Slowly, as he lay there, they grew brighter and brighter and brighter. Rahul looked at the stars. There were 29 of them because one had fallen off. They all had the same shape. He had asked Mom to stick them in regular rows. He got up and looked for his skates. He strapped them on. It took him a long time to do things like that. Then he glided to his closet. He liked skating better than walking. He took his new shirt off the hanger. Then he put it on over his white t-shirt. He didn't button up the shirt because that took too long. Rahul skated to the window. He pushed it up and open. He put one leg out of the window. Then, carefully, he put the other leg out of the window. He sat on the sill. It was dark outside. He could see stars high up in the sky. There were more than 29 stars in the sky. Rahul jumped. He fell and fell and fell until the net of the sky, which he could see sometimes when he squinted at it, caught him and bounced him high up, so high he was in the middle of the clouds. There were more than 8 clouds in the sky. They all had different shapes, but he didn't mind. The clouds were cool and wet and bouncy and felt good against his skin. They smelt of wind and rain and night. He flew on through the clouds, kicking his legs against the air like he did in the swimming pool. Between the clouds and from high above, the stars threw out shifting beams of light at him, pale blue, orange, red, yellow, and some colors he didn't know the names of. They reminded him of the concert Lavi had taken him once to. He had started jumping up and down and yelping because of the loud music and the lights and the people standing too close to him, so they'd gone back home. Lavi had not minded. But the beams from the stars felt different. He could hear the stars singing, some low and deep, and others light and shrill. It did not make him feel tense, it made him happy. He flew in a large arc around the city. Below him he could see lights and lights and lights, twinkling in the air and on the water. He could see the broad black river and the lights on the bridges. He could see roads come together and go apart like bright long strands of spaghetti, and the cars on them crawling like bugs. He flew over the roofs of houses, over fields and pools and people's backyards. It was so much nicer than being on a plane. He could be free, he could breathe, he didn't need to yelp or stop his ears. When he looked down, he could see that the city was joined end to end in a perfect circle. He knew exactly how he would draw it when he went back home. He flew on.
That's a round of applause. I mean, you talked about research, and reading that, I could tell that you did a lot of research on this, and but then you brought the artistry to it too.
Thanks.
I think this is a good time to bring up some questions from the audience. And then I think we'll have a number of questions, and then perhaps after that we could close with another reading of your choice. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So, because I have plenty of questions, but I think it's only fair to open it up. So.
You just edited yourself.
I did.
Yeah,
but it's on my
board. Also.
Yes, one tends to do that.
Yeah. Because there's a famous saying that a great artist will come and start touching up his painting while it's in the gallery wall.
There's
You never finished.
No, and when you're reading, it's quite different from when you're not reading. Yeah.
So I like this because it looks like the kind of book that I can go right in the middle and start reading in the middle. It's wonderful. It's a great idea. Thanks.
Thank you.
So these were based on these are almost condensed character plots or characters and plots for a lot of different books. Do you ever expect that you're going to take one of them and expand it out, maybe to actually take?
No, I think I'm pretty done with these characters. People have asked me if there will be a sequel, and I really don't think there will be a.
Unless you start dreaming about it.
Yes, unless I do.
Next.
Yes.
The Canadians.
Yes, the Canadians.
Sequel.
No, I actually want to do the Indians, just to turn it back now on ourselves.
Nice, nice.
So it looks probably to a reader like the infrastructure was actually put on at the end.
In a sense, because I wrote each story separately, and then I had to because there were references and there were details and things which had to be in a particular sequence, so I had to split it up, mainly to do with the main linking character. So yes.
But you think can it be read right from the middle? I like to do that. Terrible.
I would prefer it if you read it from the beginning and went all the way through.
I think Corey still asked the questions that I wanted to put. So I just thought I'd say that I really like the fact that it's really unusual that you use so many characters. And just the whole concept of 6 degrees apart, because they were in some way connected to each other. I like that. And you said that it was not at all autobiographical.
Well, Jonathan Franzen always says, 14.53% is autobiographical. So it's very difficult to say. I mean, there are obviously elements, but it's way too dramatic to have all happened to one person. Yes. And I promise, I never kidnapped a baby. So I didn't. You don't have to look at me like that.
I wasn't questioning that. Other questions? Other questions from students? Yes. Please.
How long did this idea stick in your head, and how long did you start thinking?
I think I started thinking about this book around 2005 or so, but by the time I actually got around to writing it was 2008, and then I really got down to writing it when I got fed up and burnt out with my bread and butter work, which is textbook work. So, I had to take a break anyway, so 2010 to a couple of years maybe, but not writing every day as I was saying earlier. Yeah.
And then another quick question. Any other real life characters like
Also, Shah Rukh is in the book. I actually read out that bit, but that bit is meant to mock romance novels. And then somebody said, but it makes you sound like a really bad writer. So now I'm wary about reading that bit, which has this kind of an item song with Shah Rukh Khan and all that. So.
Do you have flashbacks to something like Cody to India here? Does it come back to India?
No, I think no.
It's all set in America? Or?
Yes, except it starts in Madras and ends in Madras. Page 1 and the last page, 272. Yes, it's all set in 5 different cities and areas.
There's no Cody gossip.
There's no, but I could give you the Cody gossip later.
But there's not only Corey, but there's also Portland, Oregon.
Yes,
Indeed.
Miss Powell's
Of
book,
course.
which we share.
Yes.
I was thinking of reading out that bit, but then that kind of goes off into something else.
And then here's a good question then.
Mm-hmm.
Are you nervous about the future? You are. I don't know if you realize this. It's incredibly rare for an Indian the Indian imprint of a publishing house, but then that they've extended the version to the U.S. You are going to be touring the U.S. next summer.
Yes, I think I will be.
Are you nervous? You're going to be in Powell's books, which is a setting.
I hope to be in Powell's books.
You will.
Yes, I'm going to have the backup of my Cody School alumni, right? So that's something you're going to organize for me. Yes. See?
Thanks for that plug.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
So,
but are you nervous? I mean, about the future in general. What are you doing next?
trying not to think about that.
Sorry.
No. I'm thinking of my next book. I think I'm also, which is also going to take me a long time. So I'm also doing shorter. I'm trying to do some stories and stuff, and then I'm back to my regular bread and butter work as well.
Okay.
So there's all of that happening.
Wonderful. Okay.
Another question.
Other question.
Did you find that writing textbooks helped you discipline, sort of keeping things very tight, or is that just? And what were the textbooks?
They are for Indian schools, humanities, social studies, and English and grammar and stuff, based on the NCERT syllabus for up to class 8 for primary classes. Because after that they have prescribed books.
But still, you have to study for that. You have to know your stuff.
Yes. It helps you be precise. I think it helps you focus. But then you'd have to be that anyway, even if you weren't a textbook writer.
It's like writing a dictionary.
Yes.
It helps to have a KIS education.
Yes.
Sorry.
I think it does.
One more question. Yes, a question.
Based on your short stories that you said you wrote and what you're going to write in the future, what would you say about your genre? You're writing, what kind of style you like?
Do you mean, do I prefer short stories to a novel, or is that the question?
Like some people like to write fantasies. You've taken on characters, and I wish I'd read the book before meeting you. But so, what would you say your style of writing is?
This book's been classified as literary fiction, so I mean, one can't say that about oneself. So I don't really know. I think you just write, and then somebody else classifies it. So that's basically what it is. Yeah. Yes.
Speaking of the future and other genres, are there any other books you can maybe cover with aspects of that?
I'm sorry.
Other genres you can cover in future books?
I really do want to write science fiction or some version of science fiction, only because I'm petrified of that whole subject. I do have an idea for it, but it'll be more the Ray Bradbury kind of thing, where it's not Arthur C. Clarke, it's Ray Bradbury, which is just far easier to deal with. So I don't want to do the heavy duty thing. So yes. But I'm still working my way up to Le Guin and other people like that. I'm sticking with Ray Bradbury for now. Yeah. So science fiction, yes, I have an idea, but that won't be my next book. Maybe my third book.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a question down on the floor down here.
Yes.
When you were writing Chitra,
Yes.
when you started the book, could you see the finish line, or did it come later?
Only because I had to think out each plot line quite carefully. In that sense, yes, I had to know what the finish was for each story. And then it was a question of kind of trying to see what the best sequence was. So I had to, only because it had so many plot lines, I had to work it out. Although I do hear other writers saying, I don't know what's going to happen next. I find that a bit twee also. I wonder if that's really true. I think you'll have to have some sense of what's going to happen next. And I think you can end up writing a really bad book if you haven't figured out what the end is. It's somewhat mathematical in a way. So, not that I'm good at maths, but you have to have thought it out, I think, to some extent.
No, I think what he means is that, did you hear the last sentence? It's very famous that some of you, they know the exact
but
last sentence.
there are actually several last sentences, because there are 11 different last sentences. So, yeah.
Did you?
I can't say. I mean, it sounds good, but I really didn't.
I'd like to hear Chitra again,
Okay.
reading another passage.
So this bit, which I've never read out before, so if I stumble and mumble, please do forgive me. This is a character called CLN. I'm on page 159. He's, other than Tara, who is the linking character, he's the other person who is Indian, who goes from Madras also, and they meet up on the way and so on. He's 69 years old. He was a man, he's a retired maths teacher. and his wife, I think, died the previous year. And so he's traveling to the US to visit his daughter. And then when he's there, he finds, I'm just setting it up for you. When he's there, he finds that she's caught up in her own life. And so, as very many people find, you're kind of isolated there, and you're also culturally isolated. You don't really know the place. Many places don't have public transport. So you're kind of stuck. And so he decides to venture out on his own, and when he does this, at the local public library, he meets a woman who is researching, who's doing some research for a local professor about immigration and immigrant patterns and so on, and they befriend each other. And then he finds that he has to leave suddenly. So he has to cut his visit short, and his friend, her name is Anne, has to decides to take him to Chicago on a visit because he's never seen it. As arranged, Anne picked him up from the house at about 10 o'clock. It was a sunny morning, but she had warned him to dress warm and bring a jacket along. Chicago had a well-known reputation for being windy, or was that about gas-bagged politicians? As they drove through Riverside to get to the highway, he saw that people had put up flags outside their houses, happy to be rid of a long grey, snowy winter, in favor of fresh spring colors, new leaves, blooming trees, blue skies. The flags had cheerful themes: flowers, hummingbirds, ladybirds, butterflies. Some had slogans: "Be happy, welcome spring." When they got to the highway, 290E, the signpost said, the small town atmosphere gave way to a more bleak industrial landscape with a broad, straight road with several lanes, fast-moving traffic, and exits marked everywhere. It seemed there were no towns or cities on the highway. One had to take the right exit to get to them. What happened if one missed the exit? Miles of driving to get back on track, she said. It all seemed very convoluted. It would take them about an hour or longer to get there, she said. There was a lot of construction activity going on. They stopped at toll booths, past exits to places like Mapleville, Downers Grove, Oak Park. At one place, he noticed the highway was named for Dwight D. Eisenhower. I like Ike. And what was the other one? Oh yes, I like Adlai Madlai. What? Said Anne amused. Did you really say I like Adlai Madlai? He laughed, realizing he had spoken aloud. Yes, I was remembering the campaigns from the 50s. Wasn't Adlai Stevenson from around here? Yes, very good, Democrat from Chicago, she said. He was governor of Illinois at one point, I think. Lost both times to Ike. The traffic in the urban maze got denser as they drove east, closer and closer to Chicago, the looming skyline acting as navigator. On the other side was Lake Michigan. He knew from the map he had looked at in Sunny's room. Anne looked at the time. So let's do lunch, then we could go up Sears Tower, you get great views. If there's time, maybe a museum. Or we could just drive along the lakeshore. He was happy to be out with someone friendly. He would pay for lunch and half the fuel if she let him. Rangi had given him pocket money. The city was vertical, held together by the elevated train system, the L she called it, that looped around it. They could only move slowly through it, its bowels clogged with traffic. At lunch, he told her he was going back, keeping details to a minimum. She looked at him, seemed about to say something, then was quiet. He felt a shift in the mood. When they walked on Jackson Boulevard after parking the car, the air felt cold and dry. He pulled his jacket closer around him, put his hands into the pockets. Up ahead were the nine square tube-like structures that made up the tower. Apparently, a man in a Spider-Man suit had once planned them using suction cups. When he got to the top, he was arrested for trespassing. They couldn't figure out what to charge him with, she said, shaking her head. He felt somewhat winded when they emerged after a minute in the elevator onto the deck, 103 floors up in the sky. He wondered whether it was just his head, but the tower seemed to sway a little in the sudden strong winds gusting against it. Anne held his arm, steadying him. What do you expect? You're on top of the world, she said, laughing, leaning into the windows. When he looked out, he could see the great living map of the city below them, and beyond the vast shimmering lake and across the endless plains of Illinois. 4 states, she said, forgetting that she was still holding his arm. Illinois, of which this is the highest point, and across the lake, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Isn't it magnificent? Without thinking, he covered her hand on his arm with his hand and pressed it. They stayed like that, looking out in silence. There he was, really on top of the world, with nothing. no one to hold him back. He felt his heart was going to unmoor with lightness and freedom.
Chitra, thank you so much. This
Thank you very much.
This has been wonderful, and I believe we'll have a brief book signing as well, or maybe not so brief book signing. And I believe we have something for you here.
Okay.
And
I have a couple of books that I would like to give the high school library and to KU.
oh, fantastic!
So,
Okay,
here.
Wonderful.
Is this the moment, or?
and this is the moment. This is the moment. Carpe diem.
Yes. Seize the day.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I think if perhaps you could present the other book to Margaret here.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And this is for you. So thank
you
you
very
so
much. Thank you.
Yeah. And of course the poster. Don't forget it.
I will.
And thank you all for coming very much.
I do have a little vote of thanks. So if
please.
Which I'm just. Many people came together to organize this fantastic event for me. I would like to thank Kodaikanal International School for the great warmth, affection and enthusiasm shown me. I can't believe 31 years have passed. I would like to thank Corey Spixrud for agreeing to have this event, for being in conversation with me and for the questions and insights. Preeti Ravindran and Vijay Jesudas for making the splendid arrangements. Pippa Mukherjee for coming up with the idea in the first place and going to KIS with it. I'd like to thank KMU Library, especially Margaret Sekran and Jayashree Kumar, for generously sharing their space and being so supportive. Thanks to Billy Jesurian for the lovely poster, the wanted poster. My parents, Girija and MS Viraraghavan, for helping in multiple ways. I would like to dedicate this event to my late classmate and friend, the wonderful Paul Carmen, indubitably the best outgoing student of the class of '83. Some of the issues my book deals with, those of belongingness, not belongingness, identity and dislocation, how extraordinarily difficult it is to possess our place in the world, for once he grappled with in his life. This is for you, Paul. Thank you all for coming.